Welcome to the Windy City's Finest, on location with Mac and Perry in Grande Prairie at the Grande Prairie Live Theater. I'm Mac, he's Perry, and this is
Tahnia.
Yeah, so Tam, I'm so glad you get to hang out with us, get to learn about you and your art. But first, we're going to learn a little bit about you, and we're going to play some games and have some fun.
Amazing. Like I said, this one makes me nervous, but let's go for it.
Let's do it. Yeah, so we've got 3 different games. The first one is just trivia. How are you at trivia?
Terrible.
Perfect. That's great. So we've got some Grande Prairie trivia, but don't worry, because we're not trivia experts either, and so it's not going to be very difficult trivia.
Amazing.
And if you live here, I'm sure it'll be super easy to figure out. Just kind of fun. So I'll do a Grande Prairie trivia, and then you're going to do a trivia about Perry for me. It'll be great. All right. First question. We're going back to 1926.
Yes.
Yes.
Before I was ever even born. Yeah, I have that
1926?
pre-womb memory.
So in 1926, a visiting representative of the Canadian Wildlife Service discovered what in the Grande Prairie area, eventually declaring it home of the A, northern flicker, B, trumpeter swan, C, northern river otter, or D, woodland caribou?
Well, I would love for it to be the otter. It is the trumpeter swan.
See? Easy. You got it. B, trumpeter swan. Lovely. Easy. Great. Another history-related question. So in 2014, marked the 100th anniversary of the city of Grande Prairie. So as a legacy project, the city named 100 blank after its citizens who contributed significantly to the community. Is it A, trumpeter swans, which I think, okay, which would be fun to name, B, streets, C, seats on city benches, or D, parks? Any guesses? A, B, C, or D?
I really want it to be trumpeter swans.
Right? They had a lot of trouble naming the trumpeter swans, and they flew away. No, it's actually D, parks.
We have that many parks?
Apparently, that's what the internet said. You have 100 parks, and they are named after people from Grande Prairie who are significant and interesting.
You know what? I buy in.
Yeah, right? And I realized that I asked you both questions back to back without asking the Perry questions. So now it's your turn
I get asked both of them.
to ask me the Perry questions.
Okay, so Perry has been to Grande Prairie once before now. What was it for? A, a theater residency for school. B, a performance. C, a different interview series. Or D, leisure.
I do remember this story of Perry going to Grande Prairie. And it was A for the school thing.
Factual.
Yeah. Nice.
2, Perry holds a special place in his heart for which style of theater? A, musicals. B, devised theater. C, Buteau theater. D, theater of the absurd.
Good options. I'm going to go with devised theater.
Correct.
Great, yeah, perfect. I got both. The other segment, he didn't get any of them, I don't think. So. Yeah. Anyways, that's our trivia. It's super simple. You did great. It was fun. So our next game is called This or That. And we just have this hat that we brought, and it has questions like coffee or tea, cats or dogs.
Oh, I have to pick things.
Yeah.
This
It's
is
very
not my forte.
It's just 2 things. Don't worry about it. Yeah, and so if you're more of a coffee person, you'll say coffee, and they'll say I love coffee too, and then we'll be friends. If you say tea, it's fine.
Are we enemies now? Is this like?
We'll see. Anyways, but just to get to know you, super simple, just this or that. So how about you pick the first one?
Okay. Fiction or nonfiction?
I would go with nonfiction. I like to learn things, and so yeah, almost never read fiction books. No time. I like to learn. So how about you?
I'm also a nonfiction reader.
Yeah.
That's the section of the bookstore you'll always find me in.
What have you read lately that you liked?
Honestly, I'm reading a ton of different things right now. There's a book called Special Berries that I'm reading, which is actually a poetry book, but it's by an Indigenous author.
The Gift Economy.
Something like that.
How far in are you?
I'm about halfway through it. Poetry's actually, I mean, technically I'm jumping ahead in this entire section, but poetry is like a really big factor that I use in a lot of my art forms as well. So we get 2 different sections on my bookshelf. It's either poetry or nonfiction books. So you get one or the other.
Yeah, and maybe you mix them together
sometimes.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, it's a good book. Service Berry, good book. All right. What am I going to pick? What do we have here? Okay. Switch song during or after once it's done.
It's got to be done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that bugs you when people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I would say generally yes, I would agree, especially if I'm listening to like a full album. Just got to listen all the way through. Good. I'm glad we agree on that.
Otherwise, you're like missing half the song. How do you know how it ends, even though you've probably listened to it 10 times over? Swim or suntan?
Definitely swim. Yeah, not that I'm a big swimmer, but I enjoy, do lots of hiking and camping, and so I really like if there's like a lake in a mountain, go for a dip in the lake. So I would constitute that as swimming.
Yes.
Yourself?
I'm a fish. I love the water. Like, I love being inside of it. The ocean's one of my happy places. I don't tan. Like, I am like 1/64th Irish, and my only Irish gene is that I burn the second I walk into the sun. So suntanning is not in my future. So the water, it shall be for me.
There we go. What oceans have you been to?
I actually just got back from PEI, and so I just spent the entire, well, I guess not last week, but the week before, down there on the coast. And so I said hello to the ocean every morning.
Nice. That's great. All right. Did you pick that one or did I pick that?
I picked that one.
Okay. And we'll do one more each. All right. Oh, just got that one. Didn't take it out.
I thought it was a little risky that we were
Right,
putting them back in there, but you were running the show. I
Right?
wasn't going to like backseat drive.
It's fine. It's been a long day, apparently. All right. Pay for parking or risk it?
I am a law-abiding citizen. I'm
Yeah.
going to pay for parking, not going to lie.
Oh, good. That's good for you. I'm risking it most days.
That's really fair.
I'm not here. I'm not in Lethbridge, so it's okay. Yeah. Because, what? It's just like a 5-minute stop, Or sometimes, here's a little tip for you viewers out there. If you have a trunk, you just open your trunk, and then your license plate just disappears.
And just hope for the
And
best.
they can't scan it. That's what Perry told me to do. So, all right. We'll do one more.
Oh, man. Pineapple on pizza.
No. Hard pass on that one. There's a crime. Even though it's a Canadian invention, crime. Sorry, yourself?
I actually also don't do pineapple on
Good.
pizza.
We can
It's
be
just
friends.
not my favorite combo.
Right? It's not good. Well, I've had like a barbecued pineapple with cinnamon. That's delicious.
Yeah, I could probably buy into that.
Yeah,
There's like a good combo there.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad that we agree on that.
Not
There's no wrong
enemies.
answers. Yeah. Great. That's this or that. See?
No
Fun.
wrong answers except the pineapple question,
Yeah,
apparently.
yeah. But you're on the right side of that one. So
Cool,
the right
crush
side
it.
of history. All right. So our last game, we call it
The really stressful one.
the really stressful one. We call it Tumbling Towers. And so with this game, if you've played Tumbling Towers before,
Not to violate copyright.
yeah. Apparently you can't pick from the top 3.
Well, that's rude.
Yeah. But other than that, yeah, you can poke around and then pull one out and then put it on top when you're done. But yeah, each block has a corresponding number, and they have lovely questions that we ask people. Open-ended question like, what's your perfect day look like, or something like that. So yeah, I will do the first one,
Okay.
so you don't have to stress about it. I'll find one that's loose. Oh, it's loose.
In the
That's
game
the last
immediately.
one. Nah, I don't know if I want that one. Okay, here's one. 33. 33. All right. What's your guilty pleasure?
Actually, this is like really niche for right now. Those really, I don't know if you're on TikTok. You're not on TikTok. Okay. This is going to make no sense for you then. TikTok has these like really bad, do you remember like way back when like Lifemark, or not, whatever it was called, like Hallmark, whatever those things were on TV.
Yeah.
They were like the bad made for TV movies.
Still around, I think. But
Yeah,
maybe,
yeah. So they've shortened them into like 1-minute episodes on TikTok, and they're terribly written. They're terribly acted. They make absolutely no sense. There's a lot of like slapping of people for no reason, and the acting is really bad that you can basically see the slap miss the person. They're horrible. They're terrible. The plots are not good. They're so fun to watch. And so like me and 2 really good friends of mine will find, you're supposed to pay per episode. We're not going to pay per episode. We find them on Dailymotion. We watch the thing all the way through and we rate them. Like we're like, okay, this one's made our top 5 list. And they're terrible, but absolute guilty pleasure. Like I've watched a scene where someone gets kidnapped, but the male protagonist literally watches the woman get kidnapped until she's put into the car, and then he's like, oh, I should help her, and then goes to run to the car like 10 minutes later, and then goes, gosh golly, I missed it. And that's not an exaggeration. That's his literal reaction. That's my current guilty pleasure.
Nice. What makes you want to watch those?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know what to tell you. Like, they're terrible. They're just very funny for no reason. Like, they're not great. And I think they all know. Like, I think they all know they're badly acted. Like, there's something about it where you're like, you all know what's going on. Like, you know what audience you're pandering to. And so there's something about it that you just
can't look away.
You just got to watch.
Nice. I don't know. My mind just went to food all of a sudden. I don't know why. Before, I'm like, oh, food. I just love like some popcorn with like nutritional yeast on it. That sounds like very not guilty pleasure. That sounds very healthy. But if there's enough margin on it, then it's not healthy. Just love it. So delicious. That's my guilty pleasure, I guess.
I feel like mine's a lot guilty.
Yeah. I spend all my time just eating popcorn. No. But I just enjoy the taste, and it's just like watching a movie. You just have to have the popcorn, right? So, I don't need it. I'm never hungry usually. I just love it. So
sometimes you just need the dopamine food.
Right? Yeah, it's good. That was my guilty pleasure. All right, I think it's your turn to finally pick a tile.
I know, it's been taunting me this whole. Oh, look at that
Yeah,
one.
it's so
that
easy.
That was a good guess. They say right before tumbling the tower. 47.
47. What's one sentimental thing that you've kept?
I actually only keep sentimental things. So I'm not someone who like keeps a lot of things. I don't like clutter, but I have like these, I call them memory boxes. Actually, this is a plug for like TJX, not gonna lie, like Winners, HomeSense, whatever. But those book boxes that you're always like, what do you do with this like box that looks like a book? Great memory boxes. Okay. But like anything that like my little brother when he was like growing up made for me is all tucked in there. So I keep a lot of really sentimental things. Anything from like theater shows that I've done in the past. So any show that I've done, all of the cast will like sign notes for each other on a version of the poster. And so those are all laminated and kept in my archives and everything like that. So there's like lots of little things that I've kept over time. And so I don't think that I could pick just one because they like all come flowing in. But yeah. Yeah,
just get a sense of you as a person. That's lovely. Great. For me, what comes to mind this time, it seems kind of like an obscure thing. I don't know if I would call it sentimental, but it has a memory attached to it. But I've got this like bike lock that's been cut. And so my partner early on when we were together, she was new to Lethbridge and new to Canada. And she had a bicycle and she loved it. And then like very soon after she moved here, her bicycle was stolen. And it was like the lock was cut and they stole the bike. And she called me to come get her. And then just by chance, I ran to the person who stole the bike and I got the bike back. And it was like a great story. And she was so happy that I brought the bike back to her. And then I kept the lock. I still have the lock. It's like this cut lock that's totally useless. You can't use to lock anything, but it's just like great memory that I've kept. So
it's special.
Right, yeah, it's fun. So that's my answer this time. Great. All right, my turn.
They're very secure in there.
See, that's the last one. I don't know what that one is, but I want to do a different number. I think, so the one time this fell was when I was doing it, so I don't. I have to be especially careful now. Number 2. Oh yeah, that was the test question. What does your perfect day look like?
I feel like I always have to answer this as April 25th. Sure. My favorite kind of day, I don't know if this is a perfect day, but my favorite kind of day is also related to my artistic practice, but it's one of my favorite things to do, is I'll pack my Jeep up with like a canvas, which is very funny, and we'll get to it later because I don't particularly paint small scale. Like all of my canvases are huge for some unknown reason. So I stuff one into my Jeep and I have this big tote of my paint that I bring with me, and I drive out to like a nondescript nature location. There's a couple different ones that I do, and then I'll literally set up for the entire day in whatever nature location I am, and I'll just put on some music and spend the day painting on the canvas, just whatever comes to mind. One of the canvases that we will probably wind up looking at later is an unfinished one, but my most recent one that I did of my first nature paint of the season. But most of them don't have any cell service at the locations, so I get to kind of just unplug from real life and just kind of go exist with like the earth and the wind and the the bugs. I had got into a bit of a feud with a bee the last time I went. And so, yeah, it's kind of my favorite way to pass a day. So
Nice, that's lovely. Yeah, I would say like generically, yeah, I'd say mine is also spending time in nature. So do lots of hiking, camping. So go to the mountains, do a great hike, and then usually after hiking, get some of that popcorn and push in the east, watch a movie because you're exhausted. Yeah, that's always nice. That's a fun day for me. So perfect, sure. That's what we'll call my perfect day.
perfect seems like a really high bar.
Right?
Like really high bar.
What would your a good day be?
What is
What's
a
a good
mediocre
day?
day
Yeah.
for you?
Look it up. Yeah.
What passes the vibe check?
We have time for one more block. Tahnia's looking solid.
Don't tumble.
She's good. They're good.
32.
Oh, what's your favorite comfort food?
Oh, this feels like a favorite question. It's
Yeah.
not, but it feels like a favorite. I don't do favorites.
What's a food you eat?
What is a food that exists?
You ate once.
This is so lame, but so fun. I'm from PEI originally, which is what makes us funny. But I like potatoes a lot, like almost any variation: mashed potatoes, baked potatoes, potato fries, like any iteration. I just really like a potato, and so usually that'll be my go-to comfort food in one variation or another.
Great. Potatoes, that's great. It's a great answer. Yeah, and for me, I guess what comes to mind is pizza. Love pizza. And I also really like making my own pizza. I haven't done it in a while, but yeah, make the dough, make everything from scratch. It's delicious. So good. Very comfortable.
I don't think I've ever made pizza dough in my
No,
life.
you should try. It's amazing. Maybe you can make it out of potatoes. I don't know.
You know what? I'll try and get
sourdough.
back to you.
Yeah. See how it goes.
Let you know how that works out for me.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. You should try it. Great. Yeah. Well, that's our get to know you icebreaker segment. That's all the time we have. I've really enjoyed getting to know you a little bit.
And we're not enemies.
No, we are friends now. All right. So this is the Windy City's Finest on location with Mac and Perry in Grande Prairie here at the Grande Prairie Live Theater. I'm Mac. He's Perry, and this is
Tonight.
Hello and welcome once again to the Windy City's Finest on location in Grande Prairie at none other than the Grande Prairie Live Theater. He's Mac, I'm Perry, and this is
Still Tahnia.
Still Tahnia, yes. And I very much enjoyed your repertoire or repartee with Mac in the first segment there. And yeah, I'm super excited to jump into your artistic journey and learn a bit more about that. And just for people watching, could you give us like a really broad overview of your artistic practice, maybe currently, just so we have an idea of what it is you do?
This is both my favorite and least favorite question that I totally knew was coming. And I always find the hardest to answer.
For sure.
I'm someone who's like always had a really hard time talking about like myself and my artistic practice because it's always involved so many different people. There was a small jump scare there, but
Max making a
everything's
mess.
fine.
So you find this difficult, and we're not making it any easier, but
No, that actually makes it easier.
Okay, great.
It's like way less stress. I think because like a lot of my artistic journey has involved so much community and so much community building that it seems weird to just focus on myself in it. But I've been an artist, honestly, I always say kind of ever since I was born, because I feel like that's where the story has started. It's just that, I mean, in society's world, I wasn't like a practiced artist or anything like that. But I think art for me has always been tied to like how you see the world and how you experience the world. And like when we were kids, we experienced it with so much imagination and so much play. And a lot of that imagination and play is something that I continue to carry in my work and is something that's so important to me. And so my journey as an artist for me has kind of just basically been my whole life. And that's what I carry forward into my practice now, and kind of in everything that I do is that kind of sense of play. And then eventually you kind of have to go, all right, we have to refine something because people are expecting a finished product out of this, whether it's like a theater show or a finished painting. But I've always kind of believed that that process is way more important than whatever that finished piece is, because that process is like where you start finding those like really big components of yourself, your practice, what it is that you wanted to say in the first place, and like learn those bits and pieces, not just about your artistic practice, but like who you are as a person.
Absolutely.
And so that's kind of how I sum up I guess, my artistic vision and person and sense of self.
I love that, and I think that's a great introduction, especially, broad. I asked broadly what it is, and I love that. I think that's a great intro, especially hearing that like imagination and play, and also you mentioned community, and so I'd love to hear a bit more about those three things. But like community, what does that look like? Either maybe if we start at the beginning, not necessarily when you were born, but like your earliest kind of memory of engaging with an artistic discipline.
It all started on a dark and stormy day, July 8th of 1990. No, that was actually when I was born. I mean, if we want to get like really literal, it would have started on the playground. But in terms of like the first like time that I saw myself as an artist, wasn't actually until I was in college. And so before college, I had kind of dabbled. Like I had done like high school drama and thought of myself as a graphic designer when I was in high school. And then I look back at those designs and I will tell you right now, those pamphlets are not good. But I thought myself a designer. But I think that sense of like community really started coming in those first like couple of college courses that I took from a really early mentor who's still a very good mentor to me, Annie Smith. She's now teaching in BC. And I still reach out to her. She sends me a Christmas letter every Christmas. It's very fun. I get to hear all about her life. And she taught me so much foundationally of what it's like to have that first like theater family and to have that community to kind of be able to bounce ideas off of each other. And that what it was called back in like 2010, 2011, what we kind of know now in North America as devised theater was first introduced to me as collective creation. And so my very first drama class was called DR 1490, and it was Introduction to the Dramatic Process. And we had done, it was called Lantern Tours, and it's down at the Heritage Walk. If you are like, I really want to see some things in Grande Prairie, down at Muskosipi, they've got the Heritage Village, which is all of the old buildings that used to be Grande Prairie. And so it's got like the old schoolhouse, the Forbes Presbyterian Church, and like all of those things. And so what they would do around October is they would put actors in each of those buildings, and they would create scenes to come to life, and then patrons could walk around, and when they went into the buildings would essentially come to life. And so that was all created by our class, and we would create our scenes collectively, and so that was like our first real toe dip into the world of collective creation and building off of each other. And so like that's the first one that kind of pops into my mind.
Yeah, community, and I'm also getting this sense of like location.
Yeah.
So I'd also love to hear like, Grande Prairie, being here, I know that you traveled a little bit and we'll talk about that, but as far as community here, what does that look like for you? And even in relation to the city, like the geographical place itself.
Grande Prairie is such an interesting place to be because there's such like an interesting arts community here, and there's so many different kinds of artists here. And it's really fun because when you guys reached out to me, I said, yeah, we've got like so many different fun artists here to work with, and they're all dabbling in different fields and different practices. And a lot of the way that I approach a show is like, how many different ways can we bring art into this? And like, how many different artists can we feature? And so a lot of like the visual arts community can come into shows and like they can be featured. Same with musicians, and there's so much that happens here. Like the Bear Creek Folk Festival happens here all across our hills, and so all of our hills come to life with stages of music. And so all of these different like geographical locations can be used in different shows. And so a couple of summers ago, I run a small collective as well, Cavalcade Theater Company. And we do a lot of like found-based theater. And so we don't actually practice out of a building. We practice out of just really our back pockets for the most part. Like we go to find places that we can put up shows, and we've done shows technically at the amphitheater down in Muskosipi, but we actually did the show in the field and had the audience sit on the stage. So that way they kind of saw a reversal of that. And so there's so many fun little places. Campfires we've done shows at where the audience sat around a campfire and we did campfire stories, and we brought the stories to life, kind of like ghost stories around a campfire. And so that community and like place has become something that I play with a lot in what I do, both visually and theatrically. So
I love that, and I love that idea of trying to bring different disciplines into like theater and creation. And I did have another thought.
I know I info dumped a lot there.
No, I love it. I love it. But it was in relation to maybe what people might think of as typical theater or traditional theater. And then, yeah, like getting out of a building, even for some people might be like, wait, I can do theater in this place? And I'm just curious how that maybe ties into the other things you mentioned, of like play and imagination.
Yeah.
And what that brings to mind, like how does that inform the process, I guess?
I think because so much of what I do is like, what can we do? It's really broken down that idea of like, okay, we have to do it in a theater. We have to do it on a proscenium stage. It kind of has just broken down those walls for me. And so it also like comes into my visual arts practice as well in paintings, and we'll kind of go back and forth between the two. But when you take out those confines and we take out the idea that it has to be in a building, or we take out the idea that it has to be on a stage, you're like, how many different weird ideas can I do? And there are some things that are just totally impractical. Like at one point I was like, what if we did a show in an elevator, you guys? And like, the idea's there, It hasn't gone away. It's still sitting in what I call the marinating pot. But like how you sit an audience in the elevator, like there's a lot of practical things that have to be addressed beforehand. But you don't shut them down right away. You kind of go, okay, we can't actually sit an audience in the elevator, but how can we keep the idea of the elevator and like still bring that to an audience? And so it just becomes this big like, okay, so we have an elevator, but here's a box. So like you're just kind of constantly playing and building on it. And when you get to stay in that sense of play and you kind of ignore that refine section until you absolutely have to get there, the ideas just get to compound on each other. And I think that's why I like that stage so much, because it's just forever getting to learn and forever getting to grow with it.
Yeah. Which brings to mind something from earlier, but I really want to dive into that marinating part of yours.
Yes.
Yeah, tell me more about that. Like, has that always been a thing, or was there a period in your creative process where it was, the very refined kind of mindset, or how did no?
No, I don't think I was ever a refined person. I don't think I ever really lived in that stage of it has to be perfect right out the gate. And I'm really grateful for that, because that can be such a tricky place to be in. At least not in theater. I will say when I was learning my visual arts practice, it felt like to me, because that was a little more out of my wheelhouse, it felt like I was a lot more precious about a canvas and a lot more precious about, you have this big, stark, white, perfectly wrapped thing in front of you and you don't want to mess it up. So I will say, actually, when it came to my visual arts practice, I was a lot more refined when I started that, because it felt like there was a lot of pressure. But my theater practice, for whatever reason, I was like, let's just all jump through a field of flowers and like see what happens. So it took me a while to actually bring that energy to my visual arts practice. But yeah, no, the marinating pot has always existed. It's just this idea where like, I'll get this really random idea. I talk about this one specific one. I'll write them on sticky notes sometimes and stick them to a wall. And then eventually, I don't know, 6 months later, a year later, I'll come back to it and I'll be like, what did that mean? Or, oh yes, that was good. And the one that I reference all the time is at one point I wrote like fruity ghosts on a sticky note. And I've yet to figure out what I meant by that. I'm like, one day it's gonna click for me and I'm like, oh, that was a brilliant idea. And like, this is gonna make a great play.
Right,
but when I have an idea for something, it goes into what I call the marinating pot, where it kind of has to sit until it's kind of gained a little more steam, and then it kind of comes out. So there's a couple projects in the marinating pot right now. And they're just kind of either in research and development stages, or they're just kind of marinating until the right spark has hit them.
I love that.
Yeah.
And I get a very big sense of like giving yourself permission, or giving the ideas permission to maybe not exist yet, or they don't have to be perfect, or like they just need a little extra juice from somewhere, and you give yourself permission to wait for that to arrive. So that's awesome. And yeah, I'm with this whole refined, not refined thing. I'm very curious, I think, how that maybe ties into your like education. And so if we could talk a little bit about some of the places and some of the degrees and diplomas that you've got.
Yes.
If you could just paint that picture for me. And then I would be more curious about like, what that process of refinement was like, or like learning technique versus then playing with it and breaking technique or the rules. So, yeah, we went to the U of L together.
We did.
Yeah, so we started there. I don't know if that was first, but yeah.
It wasn't first.
Yeah.
I love learning, and so I think that perpetually going back to school for me, or I mentioned earlier that I love reading nonfiction books because I just love learning more about the world around me and understanding where other people are coming from or other cultures have rooted from, and how we all exist together and everything in terms of community and growing and just existing alongside each other. And so my first couple, I have so many parchments, it feels like. It feels like at some point I actually have to stop, but I don't know that I will.
No.
So my first couple of parchments was actually a performance diploma from Grande Prairie Regional College and a Visual Arts Diploma from Grande Prairie Regional College. And then I went to the University of Lethbridge, where we actually met. And then now I'm taking, this is the wordiest title, and I don't know why, there's so many words in it, a Master's of Arts in Interdisciplinary Studies with a dual focus on equity and community engagement from Athabasca University. So like the parchment's gonna be this big, but then the words are gonna be like this big, so I don't really know how that's gonna print out. And so, when I went to the University of Lethbridge, I already had my performance diploma, and so I took a BA because I wanted a more generalized education. So I purposefully didn't take my BFA because I wanted to have a more rounded out education on that because I already had a performance side. And it was actually a little bit of a surreal experience because I transferred in as a third year, whereas a lot of the class had already like known each other for a really long time. And so I came in and I was like, hey guys, I exist here now among all you third years who all know each other. Hi. And so I kind of found like, it wasn't that I felt like a fish out of water because I knew skill-wise I was right on board, but I had learned a completely different skill set from a completely different like faculty, and so it was a really interesting blend. And I'm actually really grateful for the way that I learned because I had a different toolkit that I could bring, and what it did is it allowed me to share my toolkit with my peers and my peers to share their toolkit with me. So it became a different kind of bonding experience that I actually really enjoyed. And so this idea of like going to school and like having that sense of play and having that sense of refinement, because I love learning and being able to like learn those additional skills, it wasn't so much like learning technique to necessarily be able to refine a skill. It was learning new ways to be able to look at a problem or new ways to be able to play in the playground, right? Like maybe you looked at monkey bars a different way and all of a sudden you were like, wow, there's actually a whole new way that I could be doing the monkey bars that I had never thought of before. And then I could also share in return. And I'm somebody who likes to be able to give as much as I receive, and so that worked out really well for me. And it became like a really whole experience for me.
I love that, yeah. And it sounds like very much that sense of like reciprocity. Is that something you look for in your artwork, or is it give, or is it get? What is that like?
I am a very giving person, and so I don't actually often expect necessarily to receive from other people in the same way that I give. For me, being able to just learn from the experience is enough. And so if I'm working collaboratively with like other artists or other performers, I guess who are also artists, so I don't know why I separated it that way. I think that experience tends to be learning for me, so it tends to be learning for me. So it's not that I necessarily need you to actively give me something. I'm receiving something from that experience alone. And so that's enough for me.
Right on. I'd be curious to hear a little bit about, you had a project that you worked on called Under the Umbrella. And I'd be curious to hear maybe about in that, were there any examples of this idea of like things that you learned just from that process? And we can talk about it generally as well. Maybe let's give a broad overview of the project first, and then see if we can, some things that you learned from it. But yeah.
So Under the Umbrella was a devised show that I did last year with Cavalcade Theatre Company. And it was a pride show that we had put on. And what was really fun about that show is that the group of performers that we had, I think only 3 of us, if I'm remembering correctly, had any sort of theater background among a cast of 7, if I'm remembering correctly. And so the other 4 had no stage experience, had no theater experience beyond like high school per se. And it was like a really rich experience to be able to bring queer folk into this world where we were just learning from each other and learning from experience. And the idea behind the show was that we were all like attending this barbecue, and the audience actually sat in and among all of the actors. And so if you were coming to see the show, you were actually coming to hang out with your bros, and we were all at a barbecue together, and it was actually a surprise party for the one actor who was coming in. And so when you came in, one of the actors was like, oh yeah, you're here for so-and-so's birthday party, like come in, they're gonna come in, we're gonna yell surprise, yada, 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 yada. And so when that actor walked in, everyone yelled surprise, and then you find out that actor's partner literally just broke up with them. And we intentionally did it that way because we wanted the audience to like really engage with the show. And the best way to do that is to get them all to really engage and then just make everybody really awkward really fast because everyone's had that experience. And then we wanted them to be able to just like really get that comfortable feeling of just hanging out in someone's backyard. And so we all had, like, creating the show was really fun because we created that backyard together and those friendship vibes together, and shared those experiences together. And we were like, how do we create this like camaraderie with our audience? And so it was singing songs together and like doing lip sync battles together. Like, it was just all of this fun. And then we put a whole bunch of queer history into it. And so you'd have this really fun barbecue vibe, and then we'd kind of shift really quickly into bringing in the Stonewall riots and understanding why Stonewall existed, and then bringing in like the Pulse shootings and the recent shootings that were happening at queer clubs, and understanding why Pride still existed and why that was still something that was being actively fought for in terms of rights. And so that way we could have that camaraderie and still understand that people are people at the end of the day. These are just our friends. Like, we all just exist together. And so part of the learning in that experience for me was like how you bring that sense of humanity together while bringing that message of importance without having people disengage. Because that not disengaging was really important. And so bringing that sense of humanity, camaraderie, engagement, and keeping everybody safe all at the same time. And so it was a really interesting production, and I think that we created it over 3 months together, and then we had 3 shows over last June. Yeah.
There's so much to dive into there. Oh my gosh. Like, one of the first places my mind is going is like working with varying levels, it sounds like. What can you tell me about that part of the process? Yeah.
I don't think working with varying levels is actually difficult at all, because I don't think that your level coming into a piece like that is actually that important, because what we're going for is that sense of like humankind and just engaging with each other. Like, that's what we were going for. It's not actually a matter of like, can you act? Like, it's actually a matter of, can you be human? Like, are you able to engage with people? And it obviously became a lot trickier once you involve the audience, right? Because then you have to be like, all right, so we're gonna get a little nervous, like we're gonna have to figure that out. But that's coachable. Like, that's so easy to coach, as long as you have people who are willing, right? And that group was so willing because the show was so special to them.
Right on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then going to like the masters that you're working on currently, and the kind of focus on interdisciplinary arts and equity and community, which I'm hearing a lot of that in this piece, this one example. What can you tell me about either that program or how that showed up maybe in that piece that you worked on?
The program itself is really interesting, and the reason that I had wanted specifically to do that program is because it's looking at everything through an interdisciplinary lens. And if we haven't figured out by now, I love looking at everything through like interdisciplinary lenses.
Monkey
because,
bars, for example.
right?
Yeah.
It allows you to see problems in multiple ways. And so that particular program is not actually fine arts related. So I'm not doing things through a theatrical lens, but for some of it, I'm applying it to theater. And so we're looking at things through literary arts and anthropological arts and sociological lenses. And so it's a lot of scholarly learning to then apply to the arts, which makes my little brain really happy because I love learning. And that's been a really interesting lens to be like shifting towards. It also looks a lot at dismantling systems to allow people to work within systems in an equitable way, and understanding that the systems that we have in our society isn't currently equitable, and that not all persons can equally participate. And it's 2025. Most of us know that already. Like, it's a conversation we've been having. And so it's been a really interesting like program to be doing while I'm also actively doing this work. So
Yeah. What is that like, balancing those two things, like, for yourself?
honestly, it's like second nature because I'm someone who just likes to research for fun. It's
Right.
like, oh, I'm just gonna go do my homework, like, which is really lame of me, but like, I love researching. I read nonfiction books to like hang out while I'm having a bubble bath. Like, I'm like, oh, let me learn more about what's happening in the world. Like, it's just something more to kind of puzzle at, and I like learning those parts of the world. And so it's a challenge sometimes because you are looking at it and your gears are turning, but my gears are going to be turning anyways because I kind of live in a perpetual state of existentialism. So
Can you tell me more about that? Is that
I mean,
too broad to dive into?
no, not really. Like, the world is very comforting when you learn that ultimately you are but a speck of dust on a dog's back somewhere. Like, really genuinely speaking, when you realize that you are not the be-all, end-all of everybody else's story, it becomes really liberating, because if you accidentally cut somebody off in traffic, it's going to feel really bad for a couple of minutes. But at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal. And so the things that you, am I allowed to swear?
Might get bleeped out, but sure.
The things that you, the things that you fuck up sometimes are going to feel really big to you, but in a week, a month, a year, they're not going to matter at the end of the day. Like, they're not going to fundamentally ruin everything that's going on. So you can make mistakes as you grow. You can make mistakes in your practice. You can try something and mess it up, and that's going to be okay, because it's not going to ruin your whole trajectory in your artistic practice. Because at the end of the day, you are but a speck of dust on a dog's back somewhere.
Yeah, and I'm harkening back to what you had shared about like your theatrical practice and how that seemed to maybe come a bit more naturally in that space, but maybe not in visual arts. What could you tell me about overcoming that? Because I think it's a very real thing that people experience, right? So you know, is there an example or something that comes to mind for visual arts?
Yeah, there sure is.
Yeah.
It's like rooted in my brain. It was really early on. Well, I shouldn't say early on. I want to say it was like maybe my second year of my Visual Arts Diploma. I don't know, I had this canvas, and eventually I was staring at it and I didn't really know what to do. And I was like, I don't want to use paintbrushes anymore. And so at one point I started using like raw spaghetti to paint with, which was like not actually helpful, for the record. Raw spaghetti is not great to paint with. But I was like, you know what's gonna be better? Cooked spaghetti.
Even worse?
That is not. Once you start mixing the starch in with the paint, it was also not good.
Okay.
But it did have me go, okay, maybe I don't have to paint so strictly. And so that released like a lot of the idea that I had to like paint strictly. And so then for a while I started painting like on cardboard instead of canvas. And that idea of painting on cardboard instead of canvas came from one of my instructors. It was like, if you're feeling a little stuck, maybe it's because the canvas is perfect. And so maybe start practicing on something that you don't see as being perfect. And so then you kind of started like punching out these things on cardboard that was, you didn't see as pretty as canvas. And so then once you got into that, bringing it back to the canvas and adding it to the canvas became less scary. And then eventually I fell into the practice of, when I was doing my underpaintings, I don't actually decide what I'm painting. So none of the paintings that we'll wind up looking at, I had no idea what I was painting when I started them. I kind of let the canvas tell me what it's going to be and let the process tell me what it's going to end up being, and allow that to be the process. And so it becomes much more of a process-based thing as opposed to focusing on that final product. And I think that my visual arts practice is actually what really cemented that idea for me, is that it actually is more important to focus on the process than that final piece.
That resonates so deeply, you have no idea. I'm going to save a little bit more of the visual stuff for maybe the showcase, just because we'll get to actually see them.
Yeah.
But if we could like backtrack a little bit towards like the kind of like equity and advocacy part of things, what can you tell me about that, and how does it show up in your practice? And is it a day-to-day thing that's always in that simmering pot, or is it always at the forefront of the brain, or is it? How does that show up for you?
I think it's everywhere. One of the things that I really love about the arts foundationally is that when we look at the history of the arts, is that it's all come out of political unrest. Like it's all come from a state of wanting to be able to say something, but not necessarily being able to say it in whatever your plain language was. And I think there's something really magical about that. Like art as its form, in just its natural form, is a unifying language. Whether that's painting, whether that's dance, whether it's music, whether it's theater, it's just common language at some point. We can watch the same show and bond over the same show, and we might have different takes on the show at the end. We might have a different interpretation on a painting, but it's still common language in one way or another. And I think that there's something really beautiful about that, and there's something really accessible about that. Art seems to be a space that we can actually unify a community and allow everybody to experience a similar experience and bring everything together. And that's, like I said, something magical that we have and something really powerful that we have. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that, and not to sound like super pretentious and be like, mainstream media, and I don't mean it in that way, but I think that sometimes we lose sight of that because we have so much art available at our fingertips, and that we maybe lose the appreciation of what all of that is because we can consume it so easily. But it wasn't always so easy to consume. And when we start to listen and we start to really look at what those art pieces are saying, what those songs are saying, what those shows are saying, they're always a little bit deeper. Like when we're watching theater shows, they're always coming at a point of conflict in someone's life, because otherwise it would be a really boring show to watch if everyone was just like, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I would actually probably still watch it because there's something really anti-theater about it. Right. There's actually something really cheeky about that. Yeah. But that in itself is saying something, right? Like whatever you're watching or listening to is saying something. And there's a reason that music speaks to us in the way that it does. And so there's something unifying about that. And so it goes back to community. And so that advocacy comes in because you can always kind of push a message through that way.
Yeah, and bring people together.
And bring people together, yeah.
Interesting. Before my last question, I just wanted to try and I don't know, I'm curious about how your different artistic disciplines, how do they intersect, or are they kind of separate things? I know that you've talked about bringing various different disciplines in. I could talk more broadly, but maybe for yourself specifically, how does that look? How do they intersect?
They intersect in a lot of ways, and I think that we will actually probably talk specifically about it on one of the pieces. And I am going to give you the nod to the one question that you want, because I know that you're going to talk to her later. But I actually like to do it by bringing other people in often. So when I directed Pillowman last year, one of the things that I did is I brought in Roxy, who I know that you are going to talk to, specifically to do illustrations for that show. Because the show itself was a very dark show about horror, I wanted to actually get to the message that the show was actually about the camaraderie between the two brothers. And so I wanted to starkly flip the idea of those Grimm Brothers stories by actually making the storybook illustrations. And so we did, and Roxy illustrated them, and we projected them on both sides of the stage via scrim, so it looked like you were reading those stories through a storybook, to kind of get away from that idea of like, these are really gross stories, and get more to the idea of, well, actually we all know these stories. We grew up with them. And so that idea of bringing that visual arts component in with that theater arts component. And then there was sound Foley and everything in there as well. That was done by a sound designer. And so they kind of intersect in that way. And then in my own practice, I think that we will actually touch on it in the showcase, but it kind of comes in by varying levels of bringing those art pieces into the show and allowing the art pieces to actually grow from the show itself, and then taking that art out of the show and then letting it grow some more.
Super interesting. Okay, can't wait to hear more.
There's so many levels.
Yeah, I love it. I think in the interest of time, I think my last question here is just going to be, how has your artistic practice changed your everyday?
I say to the core of who I am that I would not change my educational journey for anything. And I often joke that, you know, my degree's in playing pretend. But I think I learned more about how to see the world from different perspectives and how to relate to people through my artistic journey than anything else would have ever taught me. And so my ability to relate to another person all came from my artistic journey. My ability to sit in a room and be able to hear all the voices at the table all came from my artistic journey. And so the work that I do in my actual job, the work that I do as a human just in the community, all came from my artistic practice. And I would not change that at all. I wouldn't change it for a second. And I could have gotten any other degree. And technically, socially, people would say it was more practical, but in the actual practice of being a human and doing this work day to day, I would disagree wholeheartedly because I learned so much more about how to exist in this world from my artistic practice.
Shout out to arts education, it sounds like. That's awesome. Yeah, no, I think that's a beautiful sentiment to end off on. So thank you so much for your time and energy. This has been the Windy City's Finest on location in Grande Prairie at the Grande Prairie Live Theatre. He's Mac, I'm Perry.
Welcome to the Windy City's Finest on location here in Grande Prairie at the Grande Prairie Live Theatre. I'm Mac, he's Perry, and this is?
Tahnia.
Yeah, so tonight I really enjoyed learning about your artistic journey with Perry and what you're all about, and got a few little hints in there about your artistic practice with your visual arts. We'll get to see some pieces, which I'm really excited about. So let's get started. So tell me about this piece.
This is, I said just before we started this is going to be a fun game called Let Me See If I Remember What Was Happening When I Made These. So this one is actually a self-portrait that I had made a number of years ago. It doesn't much look like me anymore, which I actually think is really fun, partially because it's a capture of who I was at the time when I was making this. And that is probably one of the things that I like about visual arts practices, is that they get to have that little bit of self in them, but they're like snapshots in time. And there's lots that you can kind of pick apart in them. And so a little bit of fun that you'll see in here is a lot of what you'll see under here is the underpainting. And a lot of what I like to keep in my paintings is the underpainting. And that's like basically all of the like beginning layers of your painting. Over time, I have grown really attached to my underpaintings. And there was a period where I hated painting anything on the top of it because I was like, oh, but it looks so cute. And then a visual arts teacher of mine was like, Tahnia, you have to put more paint on it. And I was like, okay. And so then that's kind of what happened here. And then this was actually probably one of the first couple pieces that I started using dry florals and dry foliage in. And this came out of a practice. You asked me actually really early on, way back in our first segment, if there was anything that I kept. And one of the things that I always keep is flowers. And so when somebody gives me flowers for really anything, so if it's just a nice day and they gave me flowers, or if there's like a celebration and they give me flowers, I keep the flowers and I dry them out. And then I store them and I know what they're for. And then I hold on to them until it calls. And so these actual flowers were from a graduation ceremony. And so eventually I crumpled them, and it felt right to put them on this piece. And so that's what you see here. And I've kept this one for a really long time because this was a really big transitional phase for me. It was a time in my life that I was really kind of coming into my own in my voice and kind of coming into my own as the person that I am now. And so it's a little bit of an homage to that version of Tahnia, who went through a lot of stuff and got to transform into this version of Tahnia, who's kind of tackling the world. And so, yeah, I'm fond of her. Even though this is the she-her version of Tahnia, before I was they-them Tahnia, she went through a lot of stuff, and I appreciate this version.
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing about it.
Yeah.
And obviously it's still in some way a part of you, right? So
Always.
It's, yeah, of course, yeah. No, I think it's just lovely, and yeah, I love the inclusion of the flowers there. And was that, like, I know you said it was like from a graduation. Like, would that have been around like the same time, or would it have been a different time?
No, this is actually a very different. Like, these flowers were from, would have been my first graduation, which was 2012. So they would have been 2012 flowers, and this was painted in 2020, 2021.
Okay, so you actually kept keeping them for quite a while. Yeah. No,
it was
great.
kind of it marked like an end of a chapter. It felt like for me. Yeah.
So it was fitting. Yeah. Oh, it's lovely. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about this piece specifically?
No, I don't think so. Unless you have questions.
No. I think it's really, really beautiful, and that underpainting is interesting to me because some artists would paint over that.
Yeah.
It's more of an aesthetic choice or a storytelling choice.
It's storytelling for me, and a lot of my paintings tend to be storytelling. That's where I tend to lean. Is they all kind of live in different chapters and different stages for me. Visual arts has become a really big catharsis for me. Some people journal, some people find other ways to do that in their artistic practice. Some people do it through theater. Theater for me is community building. Visual arts for me is where I tell my personal story. And so I don't do that through theater, I do that through my visual arts.
Nice, yeah. It's good that you know the way to do that. So that's lovely. Thank you for sharing that
Yeah,
piece.
of course.
All right, we're going to move on to the next piece here. It's a little bigger.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see.
So sorry.
Will it fit? No, don't be sorry. Just maybe you take some of it.
Yeah, at some point, I stopped painting small scale, and I insisted on painting canvases that are as large as I am.
Okay. If you want to move it behind us, but...
I think that, there we go. If you took it there. See,
Messed it
way
up here.
way
That's cool.
easier.
Yeah.
So I alluded, I don't know, I'm just going to say at some point I talked about, because that feels right, my first nature paint of the season. And this was actually my first nature paint. So this is not a finished painting at all. This was the first one that I took out this season, which was probably 3 weeks ago now. I go down to the old Byzantine town site, load up my Jeep, and kind of go exist down there. And so this is when I got into the feud with the bee. The bee just really wanted to hang out. I'm scared of bees for some reason, even though I know they're not going to hurt me. And then I kind of just let the painting tell me what it's going to be. And I was just saying earlier that I don't know what this one's going to be yet, but I have a feeling that there's kind of two bodies of some sort, two people, two spirits of some sort in here. And I'm kind of just letting, it's in the marinating pot. My paintings also go in the marinating pot.
It's a big pot.
There's a lot happening in there while they kind of decide where they're going to be. And I had mentioned we could probably put it down a little bit because we might talk a little bit.
Okay.
There. Now our arms won't get tired.
Okay.
I had mentioned that I'm starting a project, and it's a big project, and it's got a little bit of backstory, but I'm going to see if I can sum up the project relatively shortly. And I did warn both of my friends, so I am going to say now to anybody who might be watching that the project does touch on suicidal ideation and suicide. So if you're in a sensitive spot and you don't want to talk about that, it might be a good time to just log off or to put your barriers up, so that way you kind of protect yourself and your own psyche at this moment in time. But it's a really important project for me, and it's called Project 35. And you can kind of see whispers of it on my website already, and you can see whispers of it on my socials already. And it's something that I've really only cemented on in the last 2 weeks, but I've been marinating on for about the last 2 months. And something that I personally struggled with, I just touched the microphone, so there's going to be like a big noise. Something that I've personally struggled with that I know is actually really common in the arts community for most of my life is suicidal ideation. And that was something that has kind of ebbed and flowed throughout my entire life. And last summer specifically was actually probably one of the hardest summers of my entire life, to the point where there was a lot going on in my life. I was having a lot medically happening, and so I was cycling on and off medications, and it was just a very heavy summer. And I hadn't really planned to make it to my 32nd birthday. And I am very fortunate that I have a lot of really good people in my life that I unfortunately hadn't been talking to. And I say that I am so grateful for summertime Tahnia, because that Tahnia is the strongest person that I know, because that Tahnia pulled through by the skin of their teeth. And the reason that I say that is because somewhere in the last year of healing, I feel as though I've healed a really big core wound inside myself, where it feels like that thing that I have been combating with my entire life doesn't feel like a thing I'm combating anymore. And that, you know, the really gross things that happen in life that just happen, because life can be life sometimes and the universe can be the universe sometimes, they don't feel so big when they happen, and they don't feel like they rock my world so much. And so for the first time in my artistic practice, it feels like I'm looking forward where I've never really looked forward before. And when I'm looking back, it doesn't feel like I'm looking back in a negative way. And so one thing that had been on my suicide prevention plan had always been that one day I was going to write a book about my life, because all of these weird, interesting things had happened. But I couldn't do that until like I was on my deathbed, because, you know, I had to make sure I captured my whole life. And so I hadn't written my book yet, so I couldn't die yet. That was just the thing. And I'm not writing the book. There isn't going to be a big book about my life. But what I am doing is I'm actually going to start a 2-year visual arts project. And it's going to be 35 paintings to represent 35 years of life. And I'm going to have the exhibition open on my 35th birthday, July 8th of 2027. And so July 8th of 2025 launches the hard launch of it. And this is essentially the underpainting for one of the paintings that would be featured in that exhibition. And so it's a bit of a vulnerable project. It might be the most vulnerable project that I've ever launched. It's also the biggest project I've ever launched. And so the name itself is Projecting 35, as in we're making it to 35 and we're projecting onwards from there. Mm-hmm. And so it's all about life and vulnerabilities, and being able to take that voice back and being able to tell my story my way in my words, and not letting anybody else try and tell it for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I look forward to that exhibit. That'll be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what this will eventually be when I figure out what's in it.
Nice. And I know you talk about like process is a big part of that. What would
Yeah.
that look like with the process of finishing this piece, possibly?
So a lot of the project that I'm looking at, and a lot of like how this grows and why this one's gone into the marinating project, or marinating pot, is that I started this canvas after I cemented the project. And for some of those years, I actually don't have formative memories. And I mean, we all know, like psychology says, we don't have formative memories before the age of 5. Like that's just the way our brains work. And so I've been building scaffolding to figure out, like, how do you, if I don't have memories from 7, how am I supposed to build the year 7 canvas? And so I'm going to be essentially asking my mom for all my baby albums and seeing what it is that I can find in terms of stimulus from that, and seeing what sort of sense memory you can pull up, whether those be songs, smells, anything like that you can kind of get stimulus from. And then much like I go down to the nature and sit and listen to music and throw paint on a canvas and go, tell me what you're going to be. Allow that to be the process, right? Have that ambiance and that music, the familiar memories, and let that be the process of allowing the canvas to tell you what it's going to be.
Nice. Well, that's
Yeah.
great. Yeah. Lovely. I'm so excited about that. All right. I think we'll move on to this next piece.
The danger piece.
Yeah, this will be quite interesting. I'm just not going to get rid of this one. I'll just put it back here, and Perry will take it away.
We're just going
eventually.
to magically
Go
make this
here's
happen.
okay. No, yeah, we're good there. Great. So this is quite a unique piece, which I'm excited to learn about. Can I touch it here?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great. So tell me about this piece.
This is the danger piece. She's actually one of my favorite pieces. So we were talking about this one a little bit before. This one is one of the ones that has kind of integrated all of the different components of my practice. And so the underpainting that you see in this one actually used to be a very large canvas that was spread out across a field, wherein a movement piece was done on the entire canvas. And then that movement piece was created from impulse from a spoken word piece that I had written as well. And the whole project itself is on the idea of ownership of one's body and consent over one's body. And so the painting itself is very much around the idea of consent. And so you can actually see there is a woman's body painted in here. And her nipple on the breast is actually made of the shards of glass. And so in...
The other way, yeah, I got you.
Yeah,
I was looking at that
you're
side.
like,
Yeah.
I'm missing something.
I see the boob, I got it.
Yeah, we're there. We're there. We've understood
Okay.
physiology now. And so up here we've got the dried flower petals. And in among the dried flower petals is actually shards of glass, which is what creates the glitter. And so any shimmer that you get from there is actually a glitter that's made from glass. And so the idea is, and why we call it the danger painting, is if you start getting in there to touch the texture, you actually will be stabbed by the shards of glass because a painting cannot consent. The spoken word piece that came along with this was also around that idea of other people trying to dictate what one can do with their body and like how one's body should look, and the understanding that women identifying persons and women presenting people are more often sexually assaulted than other persons. And that idea that other people seem to think that they have ownership over other people's bodies. And so that's where this entire piece came from. And it has a very near and dear place in my heart. And I have a lot of love for her. And it was the actual movement piece and spoken word piece was also videographed by a local artist by the name of Devin Burbank, who was a delight to work with. We went out to a field at like 6 a.m. It was freezing, and we did the movement piece for several hours in the morning, which involved a lot of paint all over the body and like a whole lot of mess, which you can actually see on the website as well. But yeah. The glitter itself is actually, I did mention earlier, when we were kind of gabbing before everything, it's made by an artist by the name of Stuart Semple. And when you buy it, the glitter actually has a warning on it that says, do not handle unless you're wearing gloves. And so when I arrived with the painting, I was like, okay guys, you can touch any of the paintings except for this one until I give you instructions on how to handle it. Yeah.
And so the glitter has the glass in it. Okay, gotcha.
No, the glitter is the glass.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, you won't have any other kind of shimmer in there. It's just shards of glass.
Okay, gotcha. No, yeah, I mean, there's a lot there for sure. Yeah, and I really like that component of videoing, filming the process too, right? So you're capturing that because so much of your when you were talking with Perry was about part of that was collaboration too, right? So you're documenting that process. One question comes to mind when you talk about this canvas, right? You said this was this very large piece, right? And I see it's a lot smaller. Like, did you keep the other pieces?
Yep.
Do other artists have them? What happened to those?
The rest of the canvas is still with me.
Okay.
It's all in my storage unit, which is where I'm keeping all of my art stuff, because you can only have so much art stuff at once. And it'll wind up being made into a series of paintings at some point in time. Again, the rest of them are in the marinating pot. There's a lot happening in that marinating pot.
Yeah, I just feel like there might be like a connection because
Yeah.
maybe from, from that experience. So, yeah, I think it's lovely. Yeah, well, I think that's all the time we have for this segment. Yeah, it's been really, really cool to see your work and to appreciate it. It's been really great. So yeah, thank you so much for showing it to us.
Thank you.
Yeah, so this has been the Windy City's Finest on location here in Grande Prairie at the Grande Prairie Live Theater. I'm Mac. This is Perry. And one last time.